every type of cosmic coincidence. Space is complicated. We make it simple. Some facts about the universe don't have a reason. They're just true, and physics has no explanation for why the numbers happen to line up that way instead of any other way. Every entry on this list is a real confirmed coincidence, not a conspiracy, not a hidden message, just an unexplained alignment that changes everything about what's possible, and that nobody has ever fully explained why it exists at all. We're going in order from the merely striking to the ones that make working physicists genuinely uncomfortable. Then we'll sort them a second way by whether the coincidence made something possible or whether it just sits there unexplained, doing nothing except unsettling anyone who thinks about it too long. The sun moon size coincidence. We begin with the coincidence you can personally witness with the right timing and the right pair of eclipse glasses. The sun is roughly 400 times wider than the moon, and also coincidentally roughly 400 times farther from Earth than the moon is. Two completely unrelated numbers, one about size and one about distance, that happen to almost exactly cancel out, making the sun and moon appear nearly identical in size in Earth's sky. Here's the fact that should genuinely bother you. There is no physical law requiring this relationship to exist at all. The moon's size and orbital distance were set by the specific chaotic details of a giant impact billions of years ago, while the sun's size and distance were set by a completely separate set of conditions during the solar system's formation. Nothing connects these two numbers except coincidence. And coincidence alone is the entire reason total solar eclipses, with their brief, breathtaking view of the sun's corona, are visible from Earth at all. Here's the part that lingers. As covered elsewhere on this channel, the moon is very slowly drifting farther from Earth, meaning this exact coincidence is temporary. Humanity happens to exist during the specific multi-hundred million year window when it's still true, and it wasn't true in the deep past, and won't be true in the future. The flatness problem. Here's the twist. This coincidence isn't about two objects lining up. It's about the entire geometry of the universe landing on one extraordinarily specific value for no confirmed reason. According to general relativity, the universe's overall density determines its geometric shape. Too dense, and space curves back on itself like the surface of a sphere. Too sparse, and it curves outward like a saddle. Observations show the universe's actual density sits almost exactly at the precise boundary value between those two outcomes, making space appear geometrically flat, to within a razor-thin margin of measurement error. Here's the fact that should genuinely bother you. Calculations show that even a tiny deviation from this exact critical density in the early universe, a difference of a fraction of a percent either way, would have compounded dramatically over billions of years of expansion, resulting in a universe either so densely curved it would have collapsed back on itself almost immediately, or so sparse that matter could never have clumped together to form galaxies at all. Here's the part that lingers. Cosmic inflation, discussed elsewhere on this channel, was specifically proposed partly to explain why the universe landed on this improbably precise value, but inflation itself relies on physics that remains only indirectly confirmed, meaning the flatness problem is, at best, only partially resolved rather than fully explained. The fine-tuning of fundamental physical constants. Here's the reframe. This is the coincidence category that makes even working physicists visibly uncomfortable, because it isn't one number, it's dozens of them, independently, all landing in a narrow range that happens to allow complex chemistry, stars, and life to exist at all. The strength of the strong nuclear force, if altered by only a few percent in either direction, would prevent stars from being able to fuse carbon and oxygen at all, eliminating the specific elements every known form of life depends on. The strength of gravity, if meaningfully stronger, would cause stars to burn through their fuel so quickly that planets would never have time to develop complex life before their star died. If meaningfully weaker, galaxies and stars might never have formed in the first place. Here's the fact that should genuinely bother you. Physicists have identified more than a dozen of these independent fundamental constants, each apparently fine-tuned to allow a life-permitting universe, with no confirmed underlying reason forcing any of them to land where they did rather than anywhere else. Here's the part that lingers. This exact fine tuning is one of the strongest pieces of indirect reasoning behind the multiverse theories discussed elsewhere on this channel. If countless universes exist, each with randomly different constants, then the fact that we happen to inhabit one where all the numbers worked out isn't actually surprising at all. It's simply the only kind of universe capable of containing anyone around to notice the coincidence in the first place. The strange uniformity of the cosmic microwave background. Here's the pivot. Measure the leftover heat from the Big Bang in any direction across the entire sky, and it comes back nearly identical to within a startlingly tiny margin of variation, even in directions so far apart that, under the standard non inflationary expansion rate, those regions should never have been in contact with each other long enough to reach the same temperature at all. Here's the fact that should genuinely bother you. This is called the horizon problem, and it's a genuine, confirmed observational puzzle. Two opposite points in the observable sky, separated by a distance that light itself hasn't had time to cross in the age of the universe under ordinary expansion, nonetheless show almost exactly matching temperatures, as if they had somehow been in thermal contact and equalized before the universe was even old enough to physically allow that kind of exchange. Here's the part that lingers. Cosmic inflation, again, is the leading explanation, proposing that the entire observable universe was compressed into a much smaller, genuinely connected region before the dramatic burst of expansion discussed elsewhere on this channel stretched it apart, meaning the current uniform temperature isn't a coincidence at all under this model. It's a fossil, a leftover equilibrium from a time when the whole visible universe really was small enough to be in contact with itself. The strong CP problem. Here's the fact that reframes fine tuning into something even stranger. Some physical quantities aren't just tuned to a value that allows life, they're tuned to a value that seems entirely unnecessary for anything at all. The strong nuclear force, as far as the underlying mathematics goes, should theoretically permit a specific kind of asymmetry between matter and its mirror image behavior under certain transformations called charge parity violation. Every experiment ever conducted has measured this specific asymmetry to be essentially zero, consistent with zero to an extraordinarily precise degree, for reasons the standard model of particle physics simply doesn't explain or require. Here's the fact that should genuinely bother you. Unlike the fine tuning of constants that permit stars and life, this particular unexplained precision doesn't obviously enable anything. It's not clear why the universe needed this specific value to be exactly suspiciously close to zero, rather than some small but non zero number. Here's the part that lingers. Physicists have proposed a hypothetical particle called the axion, specifically to explain why this value lands so precisely on zero, a particle that, if it exists, would also happen to be an excellent dark matter candidate, meaning one of the most persistently searched for particles in modern physics, exists largely because of an unexplained coincidence nobody has fully resolved yet. The Eddington number and large number coincidences. Here's the fact that closes this list on its most historically strange and most thoroughly abandoned note. In the early 20th century, astrophysicist Arthur Eddington noticed that several enormous physical ratios in the universe, comparing the strength of electromagnetic force to gravitational force, or the size of the observable universe to the size of a subatomic particle, kept producing numbers strikingly similar to each other, all clustering around the same staggering order of magnitude, roughly 10 to the 40th power. Eddington and later physicist Paul Dirac took this seriously enough to propose that these matching large numbers might reflect some deep undiscovered physical law connecting the smallest and largest scales of the universe, rather than being pure coincidence. Here's the fact that should genuinely bother you. Subsequent generations of physicists have largely abandoned this specific line of reasoning, partly because some of Dirac's specific proposed consequences, including the idea that the strength of gravity itself might be slowly changing over cosmic time, have been tested directly and found no supporting evidence. Here's the part that lingers. The underlying numerical coincidence Eddington originally noticed was never actually disproven. It's simply now treated by most physicists as an unexplained numerical curiosity rather than evidence of a deeper law, a strange alignment of enormous numbers that nobody has definitively explained away, and nobody has definitively explained either. The habitable zone and plate tectonics coincidence. Here's the fact that closes this list by bringing the pattern back to our own planet specifically. Earth sits at almost exactly the right orbital distance for liquid water, and also happens to have active plate tectonics, a large stabilizing moon, and a strong protective magnetic field, all simultaneously. The exact combination discussed as the rare Earth hypothesis elsewhere on this channel. Here's the fact that should genuinely bother you. None of these factors are guaranteed to occur together. A planet could easily sit at the right distance from its star for liquid water while lacking plate tectonics entirely, or have a strong magnetic field without a stabilizing moon, and current evidence suggests these specific factors aligning simultaneously on the same planet may be a genuinely rare combination rather than the expected default outcome of planet formation. Here's the part that lingers. Unlike the fundamental constants of physics, which are the same everywhere in the universe, this specific coincidence is purely local and purely lucky. Earth's particular alignment of orbital distance, internal geology, and lunar companion isn't a law of nature at all, just one planet's specific, unrepeated roll of the dice, happening to land on a combination that allowed everything currently reading this sentence to exist. The coincidence of carbon's resonance. Here's the fact that closes out the individual coincidences with the one physicist, Fred Hoyle, used to make a genuinely bold prediction purely by insisting the universe couldn't be a coincidence in this one specific spot. Hoyle noticed that the known process for forging carbon inside a star's core through the fusion of 3 helium nuclei should be statistically far too unlikely to produce the enormous quantities of carbon actually observed throughout the universe, including the carbon every carbon-based life form is built from. Reasoning that carbon's abundance had to be explained somehow, Hoyle predicted, before it was experimentally confirmed, that carbon's nucleus must have a very specific, precisely tuned energy state called a resonance that would dramatically boost the reaction's likelihood far beyond what the basic math alone suggested. Here's the fact that should genuinely bother you. Laboratory experiments later confirmed exactly the resonance Hoyle predicted at almost precisely the energy level required, a case where a physicist worked backward from life exists, therefore carbon must be common, therefore this specific nuclear coincidence must exist, and turned out to be correct. Here's the part that lingers. Hoyle himself, a committed atheist for most of his career, later remarked that this specific finding was one of the most unsettling results of his career, precisely because it looked so deliberately convenient for a universe that happened to end up producing carbon-based life. Let's sort these 8 again a different way, not by how strange they sound, but by whether the coincidence made something possible or just sits there unexplained. On the enabling end, the sun-moon size coincidence, Earth's specific combination of habitability factors, the fine-tuning of physical constants, and carbon's precisely tuned nuclear resonance, all of which directly permit something, eclipses, life, or complex chemistry, to exist at all. On the merely puzzling end, the strong CP problem and the Eddington large number coincidence, both unexplained numerical alignments that don't obviously enable anything, they simply are what they are, for no confirmed reason. On the partially explained end, the flatness problem and the horizon problem, both real confirmed puzzles that inflation theory addresses, at least partially, even though inflation's own underlying mechanism remains itself not fully confirmed. Here's the last thing worth sitting with. Every single coincidence on this list is a real, measured, confirmed fact about the universe, not a theory or a guess, and every single one of them is currently unexplained by any confirmed underlying law. Physics can describe exactly how precisely these numbers line up. It cannot yet tell you why they had to line up that way at all, instead of any of the countless other ways the universe could have, apparently just as easily, turned out instead. Not bad for stick figures on a rock.